latest weather forecast, go online to globalwinnipeg.com.
This next story is part of our continuing coverage of global news in your community. Tonight we'll head to Transcona, the epicenter of Winnipeg's thriving 20th century railway industry. A lot has changed since 1909. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, a look back at one of Manitoba's darkest moments, the Dugald crash of '47. Our Mike Brown has the story.
It was the last train of the summer, the Camper Special returning from Manaki and Molokai at the end of the Labor Day weekend. The train was running behind. The Continental Express was sitting on a side track at Dugald, waiting for the Camper Special to pass. It didn't. It rounded the bend in the tracks and slammed on the brakes.
The brakes went on, screaming.
Just seconds later, the Camper Special collided head-on with the Continental.
We hit with a huge force, and I was thrown over the seat in front of me. I was sitting facing Winnipeg, thrown over the seat in front of me, and landed about halfway down the coach.
Roy Pennington grabbed his bag and headed for the door, which was jammed shut.
We managed to get the door open. I'll bet you that coach was emptied within 45 seconds because the fire was coming down the coach. We could see it coming.
Pennington was on the 6th coach. It was totally engulfed in flames in a matter of minutes. So it would have been a coach something like this one that you were on?
Yes, it was the same type of coach, identical.
Roy Pennington was truly one of the lucky ones, avoiding serious injury. 81 people were hurt in the crash, 31 people died, including 25 who were buried in this mass gravesite at Brookside Cemetery, in part because their injuries were so severe you couldn't tell one body from the next.
There was one family, if you noticed, had 5 members die.
That was the Dixon family. The whole family was on the first coach.
Their house was decorated for their son's wedding for next week, and the son didn't make it to the wedding. He was with them.
The collision itself was so intense the 2 steam engines were fused together, but it's the fire that may have done the most damage.
The train was lit with kerosene lamps, and so it had the fuel right there to start the fire, and they were wooden cars.
The fire spread to the nearby grain elevator and a fuel storage depot nearby.
The barrels of fuel were just rocketed up into the air like fireworks. They could see it for miles.
The Springfield Women's Institute has revived the memories of the crash in hopes of placing a permanent marker near the site. They've even written a book.
One thing that we learned is it's still extremely emotional.
Fred Skogsberg was just 19 years old at the time of the crash. He was home in bed when his mother told him.
There's been a train wreck. Dad's not going to come home tonight. Gee, we never thought anything of it, really.
His father was the engineer on the Camper Special.
We'd heard all the passengers and crew were missing.
In fact, for days, more people were listed as missing than declared dead.
I jumped on my motorcycle and went out to Dugald and had a look at it. Pretty bad mess.
Fred later learned that his father, Fred Skogsberg, had been moved by stretcher to near the grain elevator.
And the grain elevator collapsed.
Ironically, if Fred hadn't been returning to Winnipeg that weekend, his whole family would have been on that train. He says his father hadn't wanted to work that weekend either.
Isn't that funny how he didn't feel like going and never got back?
Neither did brakeman Gilbert Rougeau. He was supposed to be at the back of the train, but had traded places.
Mr. Rougeau, yeah.
The memories for some clear as if it happened yesterday.
My daughter lives in Oakbank. To get to Oakbank, you go out to Dugald, you turn left and go over the track. And in so doing, so many times I turn right as I'm going over the track, and I can see the train wreck in my mind's eye to this day.
Fred Skogsberg faced his demons less than 2 years later. He took a job on the railroad, traveling the same lines.
You don't feel remorseful or anything. You just say hi, Dad, when you go by.
For Global News, this is Mike Brown reporting.